My family turned against me when I chose to adopt as a single mom. My brother convinced our parents I was making a mistake, then tried to legally challenge my adoption so he could take the child instead. I'm Sarah, 34F, and I need honest opinions about a situation that's been eating at me. I met someone on a dating app 3 weeks ago, and I haven't told him something important about my life. Before I explain what happened, I need to give you the full background so you understand why this is complicated. 2 years ago, I made a decision that changed everything. I decided I wanted to adopt a child as a single mother. This wasn't some random thought that popped into my head. I had been thinking about it for years, watching my friends get married and have kids while I remained single. I turned 32 and realized I might never find the right person, but I definitely wanted to be a mother. The process of deciding to adopt solo took me almost a year. I started by researching everything about single-parent adoption. I read books, joined online forums, and talked to other single mothers who had adopted. I learned about the home study process, the costs, and the timeline. International adoption seemed too expensive and complicated, so I focused on domestic adoption through the state system. I spent months getting my finances in order. I opened a separate savings account specifically for adoption expenses. I calculated costs for everything from the home study fees to setting up a nursery to future childcare expenses. I worked overtime whenever possible and cut back on dining out and vacations. By last summer, I had saved enough to cover the initial costs and had a solid plan for ongoing expenses. The hardest part was telling my family. My parents live in another state and we talk maybe once a month. When I called to tell them about my adoption plans, my mother went quiet for a long time. She asked if I was sure I wanted to do this alone, if I had really thought it through. My father was more supportive but worried about the practical aspects. My brother Marcus, 31M, was the most encouraging. He has 2 kids with his wife and said he thought I would be a great mother. I completed the required parenting classes last fall. Every Saturday for 2 months, I sat in a community center classroom learning about trauma-informed parenting, attachment issues, and managing behavioral challenges. I was assigned a social worker named Janet who would be conducting my home study. She visited my apartment 3 times, checking everything from my smoke detectors to my financial records. The home study process was intense. Janet interviewed me for hours about my childhood, my relationships, my reasons for wanting to adopt. She wanted character references from friends and employers. She required medical exams and background checks. The whole process took 4 months, but in January, I was officially approved and added to the waiting list for children aged 0 to 5. My social worker explained that the wait could be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on what age range and circumstances I was open to. I said I was flexible about everything except wanting to adopt within my state. I didn't want to deal with interstate complications. While I waited, I tried to stay busy and not think about it constantly. I redecorated the spare bedroom that would eventually become a nursery. I kept it neutral color since I didn't know if I would get a boy or girl. I bought a few books about helping adopted children adjust to new homes. Then the pandemic hit in March and everything stopped. Janet called to tell me that all non-emergency adoptions were on hold indefinitely. The courts weren't processing cases, and they couldn't do home visits or allow meetings between potential parents and children. I was devastated. All that planning and waiting, and now everything was frozen. I threw myself into work to distract myself. I'm an accountant and tax season was crazy that year with all the pandemic relief programs. I worked 60-hour weeks through April. When things finally slowed down in May, I found myself with too much time to think about the adoption that wasn't happening. That's when I downloaded the dating app. I hadn't been on one in over a year because I was so focused on the adoption process. I figured it would be a harmless distraction during lockdown. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I just wanted some conversation with adults who weren't my coworkers. I matched with Tom, 36M, on the second day. His profile said he was a high school history teacher who liked hiking and cooking. His photos showed him at various outdoor locations, always smiling. Our first message exchange was about a hiking trail we had both been to. The conversation flowed easily. We moved to texting within a few days. He was funny and asked thoughtful questions. He told me about his students and the challenges of remote teaching. I told him about my work and some of the more interesting tax situations I had dealt with. We found out we both loved the same true crime podcasts and had similar taste in movies. After a week of texting, he asked if I wanted to talk on the phone. Our first call lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything from our families to our college experiences to our travel plans that had been canceled due to the pandemic. He had been planning a trip to Europe that summer to visit historical sites. I had been planning to visit my brother's family, but that was postponed too. He called me again 2 days later and we talked for another 2 hours. I found myself looking forward to his calls in a way I hadn't experienced in years. He was easy to talk to and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. He asked about my job and remembered details from previous conversations. When the lockdown restrictions started lifting in our area, he asked if I wanted to meet in person. We planned to meet at a park for a socially distanced walk. I was nervous but excited. We met on a Saturday afternoon and walked for 2 hours. He was exactly as I had imagined from our phone conversations. He was tall with brown hair and an easy smile. He wore a mask, but I could see his eyes crinkle when he laughed. Our conversation in person was just as comfortable as on the phone. He pointed out different types of trees and birds we saw on the trail. I told him about some of the more ridiculous tax questions clients had asked me over the years. We sat on opposite ends of a picnic table and shared snacks we had each brought. At the end of the walk, he asked if I wanted to meet again the following weekend. I said yes immediately. Our second date was at a different park where we could rent kayaks. We paddled around a lake for an hour, then sat in the grass and ate sandwiches we had picked up on the way. He told me more about his family and his job. I shared stories about growing up with my brother and some of the places I had traveled. During our second date, he mentioned that he wanted kids someday. It came up when we were talking about his students and how much he enjoyed working with teenagers. He said he had always pictured himself having a family eventually. I agreed that I wanted kids too, but I didn't elaborate on my adoption plans. The conversation moved on to other topics quickly. After our second date, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I found myself checking my phone constantly for his texts. He was consistent about staying in touch, sending me funny memes or photos from his daily runs. We started talking on the phone every other night. I was starting to care about him in a way that surprised me. The following Tuesday, I got a call from Janet. She said that adoption services were slowly resuming with new safety protocols. They had a potential match for me, a 3-year-old girl whose current foster placement wasn't working out. Janet wanted to know if I was interested in learning more and possibly meeting the child within the next few weeks. I said yes without hesitation. This was what I had been working toward for 2 years. Janet explained that I would need to complete some additional paperwork and have one more home visit to ensure everything was still up to current standards. We scheduled the home visit for the following week. After I hung up with Janet, I sat in my kitchen and stared at my phone. Tom and I had our third date planned for that weekend. We were going to try a new restaurant that had just reopened for outdoor dining. I realized I hadn't told him anything about my adoption plans, and now I might be meeting a child who could become my daughter within the next month. I called my friend Lisa, 33F, to talk through the situation. Lisa has been my closest friend since college and knows about my adoption journey. I explained about meeting Tom and how well things were going, and then about Janet's call. Lisa's response was immediate. She said I should wait to tell Tom about the adoption until we knew each other better. She pointed out that we had only been on 2 dates and known each other for 3 weeks. She said bringing up adoption and potential instant parenthood might scare him away before he had a chance to really get to know me. She suggested waiting until we were more established as a couple, maybe after a few months of dating. Lisa also said that if Tom was really interested in me, he would be supportive of my adoption plans whenever I told him. She thought surprising him with the news after we were more committed might actually be romantic, showing that I trusted him enough to share something so important. But something about Lisa's advice didn't sit right with me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how honest and open Tom had been about his life, his job, his family, his goals. He had told me about his previous relationships and why they hadn't worked out. He had shared stories about his students and his struggles with remote teaching during the pandemic. I had been equally open about most aspects of my life, but I had completely omitted the biggest thing I was working toward. The adoption wasn't just a hobby or a side interest. It was the primary focus of my life for the past 2 years. I had structured my finances, my living situation, and my schedule around becoming a mother. I also kept thinking about our conversation about wanting kids someday. He had been clear that he wanted a family eventually. But there's a big difference between wanting kids someday and being ready to help parent a 3-year-old child within the next few weeks. The more I thought about it, the more wrong it felt to hide this from him. If I didn't tell him now and we continued dating, when would I tell him? After we met the child? After the adoption was finalized? It seemed like the longer I waited, the more unfair it would be to him. I also realized that I was being dishonest about my availability and priorities. If this adoption moved forward, I would need to attend multiple meetings, visits, and court appointments. I would be spending time getting to know a child and helping her transition to living with me. I wouldn't be able to give dating the attention it deserved. But I was also terrified that telling him would end whatever was developing between us. We had such a good connection, and I was starting to really care about him. I didn't want to lose that, especially not when I was about to potentially become a single mother and have even less time for dating. So here's my question: am I wrong for not telling Tom about my adoption plans before our third date? Should I continue to wait like Lisa suggested, or should I be upfront about this major life change that's about to happen? I know 3 weeks isn't very long to know someone, but this seems like something that could affect any potential relationship we might have. Update 1: I posted here 2 weeks ago asking for advice about whether to tell Tom about my adoption plans. The response was overwhelming and pretty much unanimous. Everyone said I needed to be honest with him immediately, and that waiting would only make things worse. You were alright, but not in the way any of us expected. I decided to tell Tom during our third date. We met at the restaurant as planned, and I was incredibly nervous. I had rehearsed what I was going to say, but I still felt sick to my stomach. We ordered our food and made small talk for a few minutes, then I took a deep breath and started explaining. I told him about my decision to adopt as a single mother, about the 2 years of preparation, about being approved and added to the waiting list. I explained how the pandemic had put everything on hold, and how I had started using the dating app during that time just for distraction. I told him about Janet's call and the potential match with the 3-year-old girl. Tom listened without interrupting. His expression was unreadable, but he didn't look angry or upset. When I finished talking, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he appreciated my honesty and that he thought I was brave for pursuing something so important to me. He asked a few questions about the adoption process and what the timeline might look like. I explained that I might meet the child within the next week or two, and if things went well, she could be living with me within a month or two. He nodded and said he understood that this was a big priority for me. We finished dinner and he walked me to my car. He said he needed some time to think about everything, which I completely understood. We didn't make plans for another date, but he said he would call me in a few days. I drove home thinking that it had gone better than expected, even if he needed time to process. He called me 3 days later. He said he had done a lot of thinking and that he really admired my commitment to becoming a mother. He said he thought I would be a great parent and that any child would be lucky to have me. But then he said he wasn't ready to potentially become a step-parent to a young child so quickly. He felt like we should stop seeing each other so I could focus on the adoption without any distractions. I told him I understood and appreciated his honesty. We agreed to stay friends and wished each other well. I was disappointed but not surprised. It was actually a relief to have everything out in the open. The next week, I had my updated home visit with Janet. Everything went smoothly and she scheduled a meeting for me to learn more about Emma, the 3-year-old girl. Emma had been in foster care for 8 months after being removed from her biological parents due to neglect. She was described as shy but sweet, and she loved books and drawing. I met Emma the following week at the foster family's house. She was tiny for her age with curly dark hair and big brown eyes. She hid behind her foster mother at first, but when I sat down on the floor and started looking at one of her picture books, she slowly came over to see what I was reading. The visit went well. Emma showed me her drawings and asked me to read 3 different books to her. Her foster mother said Emma had been asking about me since they told her someone wanted to adopt her. We scheduled another visit for the following week. But here's where things got complicated. That same week, I got a call from my brother Marcus. He said he needed to talk to me about something important and asked if he could come visit that weekend. This was unusual because Marcus lives 4 hours away and rarely makes spontaneous trips. Marcus arrived on Saturday morning looking stressed. He sat down at my kitchen table and said he had something difficult to tell me. He said he and his wife Jessica, 29F, had been talking, and they wanted to ask me to reconsider the adoption. I was confused and asked him to explain. Marcus said that Jessica was concerned about me taking on such a big responsibility as a single parent. He said they thought I should wait until I was in a stable relationship, that it would be better for both me and any child I adopted. I pointed out that I had been planning this for 2 years and was fully prepared financially and emotionally. Marcus said he knew I had done a lot of work, but he and Jessica had been discussing it and they thought I was making a mistake. Then Marcus said something that completely blindsided me. He said that he and Jessica had been trying to have another child for over a year without success. They were considering adoption themselves, and they thought it would be better if they adopted Emma instead of me. I stared at him in shock. I asked if he was seriously suggesting that he and Jessica should adopt the child who had been matched with me. Marcus said they thought it would be better for Emma to have 2 parents instead of 1, and that they could provide her with siblings since they already had 2 kids. I asked Marcus how long he had been thinking about this. He admitted that Jessica had brought up the idea of them adopting about 6 months ago, but they hadn't taken any steps toward actually doing it. They hadn't contacted an adoption agency or started the approval process. I told Marcus that I couldn't believe he was asking me this. I had spent 2 years preparing for this adoption. I had been approved and matched with Emma. I had already met her and was scheduled for another visit. The adoption process was moving forward. Marcus said he understood that I was invested in the process, but he thought I should consider what was best for Emma. He said he and Jessica could provide her with a stable 2-parent home and built-in siblings. He said they were more financially secure than I was since Jessica also worked full-time. I asked Marcus if he had talked to our parents about this. He said he had called them the week before and explained the situation. He said they agreed that it might be better for Emma to be adopted by a married couple, especially one she would be related to as their niece. I was furious. I couldn't believe Marcus had gone behind my back to talk to our parents about my adoption plans. I told him that this was my decision in my life, and that I didn't need his or Jessica's approval to become a mother. Marcus said he wasn't trying to interfere, but he and Jessica had been praying about it and felt called to adopt Emma themselves. He said they had already contacted an adoption agency and started the preliminary paperwork. I told Marcus that he was out of line and that I wanted him to leave. He said he hoped I would think about what he had said and consider what was truly best for Emma. He left that afternoon. I called Janet on Monday morning to tell her about Marcus's visit. She said that if my brother wanted to be considered as an adoptive family for Emma, he would need to go through the same approval process I had completed. She said that since I was already approved and matched with Emma, my adoption would continue moving forward unless I decided to withdraw. Janet also said that this kind of family conflict wasn't uncommon in adoption situations. She recommended that I think carefully about whether I wanted to proceed with Emma's adoption, knowing that it might cause ongoing problems with my brother. I have another visit scheduled with Emma this week, and Janet wants to discuss potential transition timelines. But now I'm questioning everything. I don't want to cause problems in my family, but I also don't want to give up something I've worked toward for 2 years because my brother suddenly decided he wants the same thing. I haven't talked to my parents since Marcus told me he had discussed this with them. I'm not sure what they actually said or if they really think Marcus and Jessica should adopt Emma instead of me. The whole situation has become so much more complicated than I ever expected. I thought the hardest part would be learning to parent a child who had experienced trauma. I never imagined my own family would try to interfere with my adoption plans. Update 2: a lot has happened since my last update, and I'm not sure where to start. The situation with my brother Marcus and the adoption has gotten much worse, and I've learned some things about my family that I never knew. First, let me update you on Emma. I continued with the scheduled visits after Marcus came to see me. Emma and I were building a good relationship. She started calling me Miss Sarah and would run to hug me when I arrived for visits. Her foster mother said Emma talked about me every day and asked when she could come live with me. Janet, my social worker, said the transition was going very well and we could start overnight visits within a few weeks. Everything was moving forward exactly as planned. Emma was going to move in with me gradually over the course of a month, starting with day visits, then overnight visits, then moving in permanently. But then I got a call from my mother. She said she needed to talk to me about the adoption and asked if she could drive down to see me. My mother has never made a solo trip to visit me. Usually when my parents visit, they come together, and it's planned months in advance. My mother arrived on a Thursday evening looking tired and stressed. She came inside and sat down heavily on my couch. She said she needed to explain some things about the conversation she and my father had with Marcus. It turns out Marcus had told them a very different version of the story. He had told them that I was rushing into adoption because I was panicking about being single at 34. He said I hadn't done proper research or preparation, and that I was trying to adopt a child with serious behavioral problems that I wasn't equipped to handle. Marcus had also told them that he and Jessica had been planning to adopt for over a year and had been working with an agency already. He said they had specifically requested a young child like Emma, and that it was just a coincidence that we were both interested in the same child. My mother said she and my father had been worried about me adopting as a single parent, but they thought I had made the decision impulsively. Based on what Marcus told them, they agreed that it might be better for Emma to go to Marcus and Jessica's family. I was stunned. I explained to my mother the real timeline of my adoption process. I showed her the paperwork I had kept from the past 2 years, the financial planning documents, the home study reports, the certificates from parenting classes. I explained about the waiting list and how Emma was matched with me specifically. My mother looked through the documents and was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said she had no idea I had been so thorough in my planning. She said Marcus had made it sound like I had decided to adopt on a whim after meeting Tom on the dating app. Then my mother told me something that explained a lot about Marcus's behavior. She said that Marcus and Jessica had been having financial problems for the past year. Marcus had been laid off from his job 8 months ago and had only recently found new employment at a much lower salary. Jessica was working, but they were struggling to pay their mortgage and had considered selling their house. My mother said she and my father had been sending Marcus money every month to help with expenses. She thought maybe Marcus saw my adoption as a way to strengthen his family and possibly improve his financial situation, since there are tax benefits and other assistance available for adoptive families. I asked my mother why she hadn't called me to get my side of the story before agreeing with Marcus. She said she was embarrassed to admit that she had always worried about me being single and childless, and that Marcus's version of events had played into those fears. My mother said she and my father wanted to support my adoption plans and that they were sorry for the confusion. She said they were proud of how much work I had put into preparing to become a mother. After my mother left, I called Marcus. I told him that I knew he had lied to our parents about my adoption timeline and preparation. I said I was disappointed that he had tried to sabotage something so important to me. Marcus initially tried to deny it, but when I pressed him, he admitted that he had exaggerated some details. He said he was desperate and that he and Jessica really wanted another child but couldn't afford fertility treatments or a private adoption. Marcus said he thought Emma would be better off with his family because she would have siblings and 2 parents. He said he didn't understand why I was being so selfish when I could just wait for another child to become available. I told Marcus that I wasn't going to withdraw from Emma's adoption. I said he could pursue adopting another child if that's what he and Jessica wanted, but he needed to go through the proper process and stop trying to interfere with my plans. Marcus got angry and said I was being unreasonable. He said he was going to contact my social worker directly to express his concerns about my fitness as a single parent. He hung up on me. The next day, Janet called to tell me that she had received a call from someone claiming to be my brother. She said he had made some concerning allegations about my preparedness for adoption and my financial stability. Janet said she was required to investigate any concerns raised by family members. Janet scheduled a meeting with me to discuss Marcus's allegations. I brought all my documentation again and answered her questions honestly. I also explained the family conflict and Marcus's financial motivations for wanting to adopt Emma himself. Janet said she would need to do an additional home visit and speak with my employer to verify my financial situation. She said this would delay Emma's transition by a few weeks while she completed the investigation. I was frustrated and angry, but I cooperated fully with Janet's investigation. She visited my apartment again and reviewed my bank statements and employment records. She spoke with my supervisor and with my character references. After 2 weeks, Janet called to tell me that her investigation had found no concerns about my adoption. She said Marcus's allegations were unfounded and that Emma's transition could proceed as originally planned. But during those 2 weeks, something had changed with Emma. When I went for my scheduled visit, she seemed withdrawn and confused. Her foster mother said Emma had overheard some conversations about the adoption being delayed and was worried that I didn't want her anymore. I spent the visit reassuring Emma that I definitely wanted her to come live with me and that the delay wasn't her fault. She seemed to feel better by the end of the visit, but I could see that the uncertainty had affected her. Janet said we could start overnight visits the following week. Emma came to stay with me for a Saturday night, and it went well. She loved the room I had prepared for her and spent an hour arranging her stuffed animals on the bed. We made pancakes for breakfast and read books together. But then Marcus called me that Sunday evening. He said he had spoken with a lawyer about the adoption and that he was going to challenge it in court. He said he had grounds to argue that Emma would be better served by being placed with his family instead of with me. I asked Marcus how he thought he could challenge an adoption that was already in progress when he hadn't even completed the approval process to become an adoptive parent himself. He said his lawyer had told him there were ways to intervene in adoption proceedings if it was in the best interest of the child. I told Marcus that I couldn't believe he was trying to take this away from me, especially after seeing how well Emma and I were getting along. I said he was being cruel and selfish. Marcus said he was thinking about what was best for Emma, not what I wanted. He said he was going to do everything he could to make sure Emma was placed with a family that could provide her with the stability she deserved. I haven't heard from Marcus since that conversation, but Janet called me yesterday to say that she had been contacted by a lawyer representing my brother. She said Marcus was indeed trying to intervene in Emma's adoption, but that it was unlikely to be successful given that he wasn't an approved adoptive parent and had no legal standing in the case. Emma is supposed to move in with me permanently next week. I'm excited but also anxious about what Marcus might do next. I never imagined that trying to become a mother would destroy my relationship with my brother and create so much conflict in my family. The saddest part is that Emma has been caught in the middle of this adult conflict. She deserves better than to have her future uncertain because of family drama she has nothing to do with. Update 3. This will be my final update on this situation. Emma has been living with me for 2 months now, and the legal challenges have been resolved. But the cost to my family relationships has been higher than I ever expected. Emma moved in with me as scheduled despite Marcus's legal threats. His lawyer quickly discovered that he had no grounds to challenge the adoption since he wasn't an approved adoptive parent and had no existing relationship with Emma. The court dismissed his intervention attempt within 2 weeks. The transition went smoothly from Emma's perspective. She settled into our routines quickly and started calling me mom after about 3 weeks. She's enrolled in preschool and has made friends with several children in our neighborhood. She still has some anxiety about abandonment, which is common for children who have been in foster care, but she's responding well to consistency and patience. Emma asks about her extended family sometimes. She knows I have a brother and parents, but she hasn't met them. I've told her that they live far away and we don't see them very often. I'm not sure how to explain the family conflict to a 4-year-old, so I've kept it simple. My parents came to visit about 6 weeks after Emma moved in. They wanted to meet their new granddaughter and see how we were adjusting. Emma was shy at first but warmed up to them quickly. My mother spent hours reading to her and my father taught her to play simple card games. During that visit, my parents apologized again for initially supporting Marcus. They said they could see how happy Emma and I were together and that they were proud of the home I had created for her. They promised to visit more often and to help however they could. But the situation with Marcus has not improved. He and Jessica have started the process of adopting through a different agency, but they're still in the early stages of approval. Marcus called me once after Emma moved in to say he hoped things worked out, but that he still believed Emma would have been better off with his family. I told Marcus that Emma was thriving and that his interference had been harmful to everyone involved, including Emma. I said I was disappointed in how he had handled the situation and that I needed time to decide whether I wanted him in my life going forward. Marcus said he understood why I was angry but that he had been trying to do what he thought was right. He said he hoped we could repair our relationship eventually, but he also said he didn't regret trying to adopt Emma. 3 weeks ago, I made the decision to cut contact with Marcus indefinitely. He sent me a long text message saying that he and Jessica had been approved to adopt and were waiting for a placement. He said he wanted Emma to meet her cousins and be part of the extended family. I realized that Marcus still didn't understand how much damage he had caused. He seemed to think that since the adoption had worked out, we could all move forward as if nothing had happened. He didn't acknowledge that his actions had put Emma's placement at risk and had caused her unnecessary anxiety during a vulnerable time. I blocked Marcus's number and asked my parents not to share information about Emma and me with him. I told them they could maintain their relationship with Marcus, but I didn't want him to have access to details about our lives. My parents were sad about the family division but said they understood my decision. They've been respectful of my boundaries and haven't pushed me to reconcile with Marcus. The hardest part of this whole experience has been losing my relationship with my brother. We were close growing up and stayed in touch regularly as adults. I never imagined he would try to sabotage something so important to me, especially something involving a child who needed stability and security. But I've also learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I advocated for myself and for Emma throughout this process. I didn't back down when Marcus tried to intimidate me, and I didn't let family pressure change my plans. Emma and I are building a good life together. She's smart and funny and affectionate. She loves helping me cook dinner and insists on reading me bedtime stories every night. She's started calling my parents Grandma and Grandpa, which makes them incredibly happy. I'm not dating anyone right now and I'm not actively looking. Being a new parent is demanding enough without adding relationship complications. Tom and I exchanged a few friendly text messages after Emma moved in. He congratulated me on the adoption and said he was happy things had worked out. He's dating someone else now, which is fine with me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been honest with Tom about the adoption. Would we have continued dating? Would he have been supportive when he found out later? I'll never know, but I'm glad I told him the truth when I did. The adoption is finalized now. Emma is legally my daughter and no one can change that. We're planning a small celebration party next weekend with my parents and a few close friends. Emma wants to invite her preschool teacher and the librarian from our local library who knows her by name. I don't regret any of the decisions I made, even though they cost me my relationship with Marcus. Emma deserved an advocate who would fight for her placement and her stability. I'm proud that I was able to be that person for her. People ask me sometimes if I think Marcus will ever understand why I was so angry about his interference. I don't know and I don't spend much time thinking about it anymore. I have a daughter to raise and a life to build with her. That's where my energy goes now.